What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and it's Labor Day weekend, which means a lot of drafts are happening here, and I imagine a lot of you guys are scouring YouTube for rankings. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to go through our top 3 rounds for fantasy football and go player by player through my top 36 here. So with all that being said, if you enjoy, make sure down below, subscribe, leave a like. Let's go.
Like this froze, ice cold, ice around my body like I'm frozen. She gon' let me.
Now, a few notes before we get into this. We're going to be breaking things down by tiers. I always say this, but I feel much stronger about the tiers and sort of where the breaks are than I do player A versus player B. Now, these are also going to be filtered towards PPR and half PPR leagues. And then on top of that, this is going to be our top 36. If you want access to my top 200 players for redraft leagues, I have a checklist, a cheat sheet that is on Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. You can find in the description. You can find in the comment section down below. On Patreon, you're going to get my top 200 rankings. There's a checklist. You can check players off. I have my target rounds for each player, where I'm trying to draft any of them, and they are all tiered. I have my targets and my avoids also highlighted there. It's everything that you need to go out there and crush your draft. So with that being said, let's talk through some players here. Now, our first tier is our 101 candidates. And to me, the two very clear 101 candidates in 2023, Jefferson and Jamar Chase, assuming you play in PPR or at least half PPR. These are two players on pass-happy offenses with good quarterbacks and Joe Burrow, Kirk Cousins, that are on just insane superstar trajectories here, where if we look at wide receivers since the merger and their points per game in their first 3 seasons, the top 5 is OBJ, Jefferson, Randy Moss, Jamar Chase, Jerry Rice. The only guys over 18-plus points per game. Really crazy stuff. Jamar Chase has an opportunity here to move up this list because he still has one more year to add on here. But both of these guys, superstar trajectories, super high floors, and their best years are to come here. Now, after that, we still have guys in the same tier, and it's very much justified to take this guy, Christian McCaffrey, as high as like 101 overall, if that suits you. He has gapped the field since he got to the NFL. He has 22.1 points per game since 2017. Everyone else is below 20 points per game. Now, of course, he's in a new offense in San Francisco. Elijah Mitchell is going to take some of the between the tackles work, maybe grind out some carries late in games, grind out some stuff between the 20s. But at the end of the day, Christian McCaffrey, when he plays football games, is going to be over 20-plus points per game. He's going to catch passes. He's going to catch touchdowns. Again, if you want to have him first overall, you can. If you're in a standard league, to me, McCaffrey is the clear 101. Then our last player in this tier, as like an elite option, you could make the case for 101, but I really wouldn't do it with Tyreek. But he was a monster last year. If we look at just the games where he was with a healthy Tua, he was at 22.5 points per game, which would have been the highest among all wide receivers and running backs last year with over 10 games played. So he was that kind of guy with Tua in the lineup. The question mark for Tyreek is really just Tua. If Tua can play an entire season, Tyreek Hill is probably going to be in the mix for wide receiver 1 overall. If he doesn't, then Tyreek Hill is going to have some issues. Now, on top of that, you have the other concern that where Jefferson and Chase have their best years to come, Tyreek Hill coming off sort of the later parts of his prime here. Most likely he's still going to be fine, but if that game-wrecking speed isn't still there, there's a scenario where Jalen Waddle outproduces him, and Tyreek's like more of a low-end wide receiver 1, but very, very small downside there. Just giving you a reason for why he's at 4 and not higher up here. Now, moving on to our next tier. These are my elite first-round picks. So guys that I'm fine taking the top 6 or 7 picks. I don't want to take them in the top 4 because, again, like these are my very clear top 4. But after that, these guys are all very firm first-rounders. So guys that I feel really good about taking in the first round, just, again, not in the top 4 picks. And first up here, our 105 is going to be Bijan Robinson. Just absolutely crazy hair on his player picture, if I could find it here. I'm not sure if you can even see his hair with the black backdrop, but I feel really good about Bijan. If I can't get one of these top 4, I'm very much happily going to the podium and taking him 5th overall. This is one of the best prospects we've ever seen. I know some people are apprehensive about Bijan because he's a rookie. We haven't seen him play, but I think that that's just a bad mindset to have where it's like we have to see it first to believe it. You could have taken that same approach like Jamar Chase's rookie year and really missed out. Right now, we have a running back landscape where, again, McCaffrey's at the top, and he's like 27, 28. All of the best running backs in the football right now are 25-plus years old on the back half of their primes. Where we get Bijan Robinson, fresh legs, best running back prospects since Saquon Barkley. I like betting on him to just be fresh legs and be one of the best running backs in the league right out the gate. He's going to be in this Arthur Smith offense that produced a ton of good seasons with Derrick Henry. They have a top 10 offensive line on established to run. I just want pieces in this rushing offense. And in preseason already, he had way more carries, way more snaps than Tyler Algier. I'm really not all that worried about Tyler Algier or Cordell Patterson eating into his workload. Now, if Bijan makes you uneasy because he's a rookie and like he feels unproven to you, then just go with Austin Eckler, man. Austin Eckler is very much fine. He's my 106. He has back-to-back 20-plus point per game seasons. He's going to be the focal point of a Justin Herbert, Kellen Moore offense here, which is really exciting. He has one of the highest floors among running backs in fantasy when we take out, of course, running backs as a whole don't really have high floors because they all get hurt and injured at a high rate. But if you were to take out the injuries part and just like projections, Eckler has one of the steadiest projections out there, but he also doesn't have that high-end, 23-plus point per game, dominant season. But he can be very, very good for you. After that, we have our 107 here, which is Travis Kelce. And Travis Kelce is a tough one to wrestle with because when you take a tight end early, it doesn't really feel great or sexy or anything, right? If you take Travis Kelce at your 107, it's not a great feeling, but this is a guy who hasn't finished lower than tight end 2 in points per game since 2015. He gives you a massive, massive advantage here where tight ends just, he's going to give you a massive advantage on a week-to-week basis where he's just going to blow other tight ends out of the water. You just need to make up for it everywhere else to take the luxury of taking Kelce early on. Really, the only downside for him is that he's getting older. He's 34, but he is still the number one passing option in a Chiefs offense with Patrick Mahomes. So it's tough to really discount him much for being old at this point. And then our last player in this tier, our 108, is Stephon Diggs. This is a passing offense since Stephon Diggs got to Buffalo. They have been top 5 in pass attempts per game and passing yards per game. And Diggs, over that 3-year span that he's been in Buffalo, has been the wide receiver 6, the wide receiver 9, and the wide receiver 3 in points per game. So I have no problem taking here. He's pretty much a lock to be a wide receiver 1. We want players in this offense, and he is still a really, really good player. Now, from here, there's a tier break. These are all guys that are very clear first-round picks, guys that you'll almost never see make it to the second round. Now, when we get to this spot, we have our high-end round 1-2 turn options. These guys don't always feel great to pick because a lot of the time you're able to get them in the early second. If all 8 are gone, you have to take one of these guys the 109. It doesn't really feel great, but if I had to put one here, for me, it would be CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb, my 109. Again, there's a jumble of options here, and you can sort of have them however you'd like. But I'll go CeeDee Lamb. He's just a solid option. Last year, when Dak Prescott came back from injury around week 7, CeeDee Lamb had 19.5 points per game as, I believe, the wide receiver 3 over that stretch. So he was really good on the back half of the season with Dak Prescott. He has a really nice floor. He's going into year 4. He could still have his best ball ahead of him here. It wouldn't shock me if he was a top 3 guy in 2023. I don't know why I struggled with that. But then we have Amon-Ra St. Brown. Someone who I think is a sneaky bet to lead the NFL in receptions. Was probably not that sneaky, to be real. And it's a coin flip between him and CeeDee Lamb. You can have him as high as 10 or 9, Amon-Ra St. Brown, especially in full PPR here. But last year in games where he had over 60% of the snaps, he was 18.6 points per game as the wide receiver 8 or something over that stretch. And that was, again, with a lot of Jamal Williams vulturing touchdowns. So much as Jamal Williams vultured touchdowns from Swift, he also vultured touchdowns from Amon-Ra St. Brown. If Amon-Ra St. Brown hits 115, 125 receptions. It wouldn't shock me at all to see Amon-Ra St. Brown do what Michael Thomas did at the peak of his powers, where he had 120 plus catches and 10 plus touchdowns and was the wide receiver 1 overall. I think that's in Amon-Ra St. Brown's range of outcomes. He was top 10 in yards per out run and targets per out run last year. Very similar mold to your Kupp, Michael Thomas types out of the slot. After that, we have Tony Pollard as our 111. And I want to say, it's always important to know when we get to these round 1-2 turn options. Let's say you are the 11 spot, and you have let's say you have CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and AJ Brown all in the same tier, right? So you have 3 wide receivers, but you're at the 111, and you really want Pollard. You can take Pollard and then just let the guy at the 12 spot take 2 of these receivers and just get one of them back. So make sure you're playing that game where I might have Pollard here, but don't be afraid to take him higher than that if there's a bunch of wide receivers at the turn that you'd be okay with after that, if that makes sense. Just always be aware of kind of what's going on at the turn and how you can sort of push values past the turn. But Tony Pollard, to me, one of my favorite legendary running back candidates this season. He was the RB8 in points per game last year with just a 48% opportunity share, which was 34th in the NFL. He's a really, really good player. No Ezekiel Elliott. The players behind him are Deuce Vaughn and Rico Dowdle. He is going to be the guy in this offense. The Cowboys have the 6th best offensive line on established the run. They're going to pass the ball a bunch. And Tony Pollard, if he can get the receiving work this year, which he should, Zeke went from 234 routes last year to now leaving the team. If Pollard absorbs a lot of those, he was top 10 in yards per out run last year, top 10 in receiving grade, passer rating when thrown to, yards per reception. He's a very good receiver. And if he can get a Kamara Eckler type workload, then Tony Pollard can be in contention for RB1 overall. Now, at the 112, we have Cooper Kupp, and I do my best to keep my rankings as up-to-date as possible, and this is where I have them right now. My rankings right now, by the way, they're all up-to-date for like the Kupp stuff, the JSN stuff, McLaurin, any injury out there, anything out there, it's all been updated for it. Jonathan Taylor, all of it. This is where I ended up with Kupp. Now, you can have him all the way at the end of this tier. You can have him all the way at the beginning of this tier. It's going to come down to your risk tolerance. Now, this is a tweet that we saw today from Deepak Chona, one of the injury analysts in this space. He has him as day-to-day, mild re-aggravation on the hamstring. Those average 2 weeks. Pretty much the data slightly favors him sitting week 1, but its close practice return timeline will be highly useful. So pretty much what it comes down to is he's going to miss a game or two with risk for re-injury. So it's tough to completely gauge what's going on with Kupp. Like, there's a chance that he doesn't, he could play like 6 games this year, and that's awful. He could come back in week 2 and still be what Cooper Kupp has been the entire season. It really just comes down to where you can handle the risk. This, for me, is where I decided 112 here, where we're right at the turn and we can just double tap things. And this is where I'd have Kupp personally. But again, this is why we have things tiered. Depending on what your risk tolerance is, will depend where you can take Kupp, just in terms of what you can stomach. But when Kupp was healthy last year, he was still everything that he was in 2021, where he had 24.8 points per game, which would have outscored the RB1 and wide receiver 1 overalls last year by over 2 points per game. That's a massive, massive leg up on the field. He was still that guy last year. He could be that guy this year, but there's a lot of risk coming with it. After that, we have our 201 here in Davante Adams. To me, Davante Adams is still a high-end wide receiver 1 option. He has finished top 6 in points per game every single year since 2018. And I think that the step down from Derek Carr to Jimmy G is a little bit overstated here. Jacob Sanderson outlined it really well, where if you look at Jimmy Garoppolo's career stats versus what Carr did last year, across the board, I mean, he has a better completion percentage, better adjusted yards per attempt. Touchdown percentage is slightly better. PFF grade is similar. It's just that it's not like a downgrade. It's at the very least not a downgrade. It's a lateral move going from Derek Carr to Jimmy G. And that should mean that Davante Adams should be very much fine. He's still as good as he's ever been. He posted great numbers in reception perception. He posted career highs in yards per reception. He had 14 receiving touchdowns. He is still that guy. Now, if you're more running back hungry, or if you're in a league that's more running back hungry, that's 2 wide receiver, 1 flex, and it's half PPR, feel free to move Saquon up here. But he feels like one of the last true bell cow running backs where you can pencil him in for an 80% opportunity share. There's no competition behind him. He was the RB5 last year in points per game with 1,300 plus rushing yards, 50 plus receptions. The only concern to me is that having that much volume and that much snap share and opportunity share and only getting the RB5 in points per game tells me that he's a little bit limited in terms of his ceiling, but I am open to the idea that in year 2 of this offense with legit passing options, instead of having guys like Colin Johnson running routes out there, they now have a guy like Darren Waller to, boxes won't be as stacked at this time around. Efficiency isn't sticky year to year. I'm open to the idea that Saquon could be efficient and sort of challenge for RB1 overall here, but it is a little bit less murky than the running backs I had to have ahead of him. Then we have our 203 here, which is Garrett Wilson. I'll be honest, I moved him up a spot. I moved him over A.J. Brown, who we'll have here in a second, after making our wide receiver rankings video, because I just think the more research I do, the more I like Garrett Wilson. Where if we look last year, as a rookie with quarterbacks Joe Flacco, Chris Streveler, and Mike White, he had 17.3 points per game in those games without Zach Wilson as a true rookie, which is absolutely bonkers. And now he goes from that to Aaron Rodgers, and Aaron Rodgers is one of these guys. Aaron Rodgers and Nathaniel Hackett, their scheme has a lot of targeting your wide receiver in the end zone, where a lot of the time Davante Adams would go in motion and sort of get a little mismatch on the in the red zone, and they would throw the ball to him. In 3 years with Nathaniel Hackett in Green Bay, they were 1st, 4th, and 7th in red zone pass rate over expectation. They're going to be the same this year. We saw already in the preseason where I believe that it was going to be a run play called, Josh Norris has broken this down a bunch, but there was a run play called, and then Aaron Rodgers checked to a pass at the line of scrimmage in the red zone, and that was that Garrett Wilson over-the-top fade really quick. We're going to see a lot of that. He is going to compete for league lead in receiving touchdowns. This offense is going to be much better. Garrett Wilson is going to be a problem, and he also has like a crazy high efficiency ceiling as well as a guy that can run routes, get open, great at the catch point, and then he also had the second most missed tackles forced last year behind just Deebo Samuel, which is really, really impressive. Now, after that, our 204 here is A.J. Brown. And this one's so tough. I love the talent when it comes to A.J. Brown. This is a guy that we bet on almost every year of his career now. He has a career 2.6 yards per hour run, which would have been third behind just Jefferson and Tyreek Hill last year. That's his career average. He is insanely efficient, but it's tough because he continues to be in these low-volume passing offenses, which I like betting on when he's like a third-round pick. But now that we're paying damn near like first-round prices for him, it gets tough for me. He's topped out at 17 points per game over the last few years. He hasn't had a top 5 finish through his first 4 seasons yet. And last year, this offense was 10th in pass attempts. It's tough. I mean, they could pass more. They're playing some of this AFC East schedule. They could pass more. That's in the range. But you now have Devonta Smith there, really emerging. It's just tough. His ceiling to get to like 20-plus points per game is a lot murkier than everybody else in this list, in my opinion. Then our last player in this big tier, again, like this is why I kind of like the late second. I like the late second, but I hate the 109 is what I'll say. Like 109 is brutal because if all of these 8 are gone, and you have to be the guy to take the first one of this tier, it does not feel good. But if you can get like the 12 spot and you can like double tap 2 of these, then things feel very good there. And at this last spot, we have Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb, who, by the way, best running back in the NFL. I'll say that right now. But for fantasy football, it's tough. Where if I'm drafting a running back early, I want RB1 overall upside. He's like a first-round pick. To me, I can take him in like the early second, mid-second. That's where I feel comfortable because I get it. Like the RB1 overall upside is there if this Cleveland Browns offense is good and Deshaun Watson sort of gets him in the right direction, and Nick Chubb catches passes. But those are 2 really big ifs. Where Nick Chubb over his career, he's now had 7 games without Kareem Hunt during Kareem Hunt's span there, and his points per game didn't budge, his receptions per game didn't budge, and his targets per game didn't budge. So it's really tough for me to be like, yeah, it's 100% a given that now that Kareem Hunt isn't there, that Nick Chubb is going to get all the passing down work. Like there's a chance that they traded for Pierre Strong to go out there and be their third down back. That's in the range of outcomes. You'd hate to see it, but it is possible that's why Pierre Strong is there. It's not a lock that he's going to be the passing down back. Nick Chubb also has never finished as even a top 5 point per game running back, never mind the RB1 overall, which again, I would like that upside if I'm taking a running back that early. But I do see the appeal there. He's a very good running back, and it wouldn't shock me if he was the best running back in fantasy football. I just think drafting him in the first round, you're kind of taking some of the projection part of his profile and making it a given. Now, after that, we have Chris Olave that starts off our high-end mid-late seconds tier. And this is a massive tier break. I hate the 206. If I'm sitting at this pick and this is exactly how the first, it's 101 to like 205 goes, I am absolutely reeling. Just because I like Chris Olave. Like Chris Olave is great, but taking him in the middle of the second does not feel good at all. Now, again, Olave, I like him, and it's just like, especially in home leagues, Olave is going to fall to the third sometimes. So taking him as high as like 206 never really feels great. But it's just kind of what the nature of the draft is this year, where I do feel like a lot of these mid to late seconds are just like ugly picks. Like the 2-3 turn, I really do not like this year. But Olave, he is a fine profile. It's just a matter of things kind of falling off a tier cliff here. But he is great. Like he had an insane rookie season. Year 2 and 3 breakouts are king. He had a top 6 target per out run last year. He had the 8th yards per out run. He is really, really good. Year 2 breakout potential. Again, just a pretty big tier break from this other tier. And then we only have 2 players in this tier of guys that like I'm sort of comfortable taking in the mid-second if I have to. We have Jalen Waddle. He's someone that never gets to the third round, so I'm comfortable taking him in the mid-second, but I don't love it. Like, this is the wide receiver 2 in an offense. Tyreek Hill likely outscores him, but again, there is a world where Waddle outscores him, or Tyreek Hill isn't the same as he used to be, or he gets hurt, and Waddle is just an absolute monster. He is very explosive. He was absolutely on fire last year as like a top 6 option while Tua was healthy, so I don't hate the idea of him taking another step forward. I believe in year 3. Now, moving on from that, we have our round 2-3 options, which is just like at the 2-3 turn. I don't love any of these guys in the late second or like mid to late second, but I love all of them as early thirds. I don't know if that makes sense here, but the two guys that I have here that sort of go hand in hand are T. Higgins, who I have ahead of Devonta Smith, and Devonta Smith as just guys that are just like fine luxury wide receiver 2s. We've talked about this before, but I want upside when I draft a guy in round 2, and 90% of 20-plus point per game seasons have come from wide receivers drafted as the wide receiver 1 on their team, which, of course, these guys are both the wide receiver 2s on their team. And then also there's never been a 20-plus point per game season from 2 wide receivers in the same offense. And that's kind of the threshold that I'm shooting for in the second round. So, again, it doesn't feel super sexy taking them in round 2. They're guys that I'll drag my feet to take in round 2. I absolutely love them. If either of them get to you in the third, though, absolute smash picks. It's just a value thing for me. Again, they're fine picks. They're both my, they're my 209 and 2010, or like 208 and 209, so I would take them in the second. It just doesn't feel cozy is what I'm trying to say here. Now, we also have Ridley as like the last wide receiver in this tier, if I can potentially find him. And again, like, this is the entire tier. You can have flip-flops however you want. We're going to have elite quarterbacks in this tier. Like, I'll actually just put them all here just to have them in this section so you guys can kind of see what I'm talking about. We have Josh Allen, Mahomes. We have Hurts as well. Like, we have Andrews too. So if you want to take one of these elite onesies, you absolutely can. And again, like, just play the turn. Like, if there's one quarterback left, or let's say there's just Josh Allen, right? And you have these 3 wide receivers to pick from, and you're at the 11 spot, if you definitely want to have an elite quarterback, go Allen and just let the turn sort of dictate for you. You know what I mean? But Calvin Ridley's a guy I'm fine taking in the late second. Last time we saw him, he wasn't efficient, but he was the wide receiver 4 in expected points per game. He was getting a lot of volume. That means that's based on targets and ADOT. He's still a high-level wide receiver, 87th percentile reception perception versus man coverage in his final season before taking his break. Now, of course, there is some risk of him taking this break, but if he didn't take this break and he was just going to be dropped into this offense, you can make a case to have Ridley as high as up here. So we're still getting a little bit of a discount on Ridley, which then takes us to our elite quarterback tier, where this is just kind of like, you just have to sort of think through the positional advantage, where this is my 211, 301, 302, where I do love these elite quarterbacks at the turn. Last year, the top 4 quarterbacks generated a ton of wins over replacement. Now, wins over replacement is just like, what's the advantage you're getting across positions? And the top 4 quarterbacks last year, you can see in the top left, huge advantages. And that's what Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, and Mahomes represent as guys that you can't really make up for later on in fantasy. Like, you can't take a guy in round 10 and match the output of what these guys can do on the ground, plus with their arm through the air. So if you want to take one of these guys in the second, have at it. They are all very much justified picks as early as, again, like 208, 209, 210. And I love I have them ranked this way. I have them ranked Allen, Hurts, Mahomes. Or no, I have them ranked Allen, Mahomes, Hurts. But you can flip swap them however you want. Like, they're all great options. Then we also have Mark Andrews, which you can see as well, like that orange part of this graph. Kelsey was super up high, but if Andrews can kind of bounce back, he can be up there as well in terms of wins over replacement. And kind of be a really nice positional advantage for your team. So I have him here as I believe this is like 302. And last year, Mark Andrews absolutely crushed. He, in 10 games with Lamar Jackson, had 14.5 points per game. What really dragged him down was the 5 games without Lamar Jackson. Now, he was on an 88-catch, 1,022 receiving yards, 8 touchdown pace. He was the tight end 2 during that span. Then again, Lamar misses time, and things kind of fall apart. But I'm really optimistic this year. You go from Greg Roman to Todd Monken here, who's going to just turn up the passing volume, the pace. It's going to be the most modern offense we've seen. Mark Andrews likely is going to be the leading target on this team, potentially could lead the NFL in receptions or touchdowns, receiving touchdowns. I don't know why I said it like that. But Mark Andrews could be an absolute hammer in this offense. Then we have some running backs. Now, again, if you're in more of a running back hungry room, maybe you're a home league where guys are taking running backs high, maybe it's a 2 flex, maybe it's a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex, like half PPR league. Feel free to move these running backs up, man. Feel free to move them up, but these are just guys that I'd prefer to take in a vacuum where it's like 2 wide receiver, 2 flex, or 3 wide receiver, 1 flex, full PPR potentially. These are guys that I want to be taking in the third after starting wide receiver. Now, again, if you're in that same boat of like Jacobs versus these 3 wide receivers, and you can kind of push them past the turn and play the turn game because of the running back scarcity, 100% go ahead and take him in the second. But for me, I have him as I believe this is my 205 here. Or no, I think this is my 303. I was way off with that. But yeah, I think this is my 303 here with Josh Jacobs. And again, I would just prefer to go wide receiver before taking him. You can pretty much pencil him in for like 17 plus points per game, but the ceiling isn't anything crazy. He had a career year last year and was just topped out at like 19 points per game. So I don't know if RB1 overall can ever be in the cards for him. But if you take a guy like that in the third round, you don't need RB1 overall. You just need, again, like that 19 plus point per game area. But the higher you push up Jacobs, the higher you kind of need his ceiling to be to offset that draft price. Now, this is the 27th offensive line on established the run. He's coming off a career year in touches. There's some risk of this offense being bad. So there is inherent downside with Jacobs, but he is a very nice, cozy, like RB1 type of guy. And then our last player in this tier is the big dog, Derrick Henry. I don't think I have him in here. Hold on. All right, so I put Derrick Henry in there. I don't love him. I have him as, I believe this is my 306 here. Like, it was a mid-third. Again, you can take him at the top of this tier if you're in a running back heavy league, but I can't put him much lower than this. I have him as my RB4, or he was the RB4 in points per game last year at 18.9, but the risk is pretty brutal. He's in his 8th season. He's 29 years old. He had the second most touches. He has the second most touches in the entire NFL behind just Ezekiel Elliott. And the Titans team is pretty bad. It's the 32nd ranked offensive line on established to run. They're coming off an awful dumpster fire type of year. I'm just not sure that Derrick Henry can still be the driving force for an NFL offense these days, and I'm not really sure what his ceiling looks like at this point. He's only hit 20-plus points per game once in his career. Now, after that, we have two middle third-round targets that I think are both smash picks in the third round, just given what their upside is at their position of running back. First, we have Gibbs as, I believe, my 307 here. And this is somebody that has a crazy college receiving profile. If we put him toe-to-toe versus your Saquon, Christian McCaffrey seasons, which both of those guys as rookies went absolutely insane, where they had 91 catches Saquon Barkley, 80 catches for Christian McCaffrey. Saquon had a total of 102 catches in college. McCaffrey had a total of 99 catches. Jahmyr Gibbs had 104 catches in college, all of them top 12 picks. It wouldn't shock me at all if Jahmyr Gibbs also challenged for 80-plus catches in his season, which if you go for 80-plus catches, your floor at worst is RB1. So I really do like Gibbs in this offense. He's in the mix to be like have the second most targets on this team. And then we have Ramondre Stevenson, who's just an absolute unicorn that I want to bet on. He was 4th in receptions last year at 69. He had the 3rd most targets among running backs at 89. And he was 4th in target share at 17.3%. He was really only behind Eckler and McCaffrey when it came to targets last year, and Eckler and McCaffrey are both sub 205 pounds, while Ramondre Stevenson is 231 pounds. And he has a ton of juice as well. He was 3rd in yards after contact per attempt. He was 11th in elusiveness rating, 10th in explosive run percentage, 5th most rushes of 15-plus yards last year, and 11th in rushing yards over expected per attempt. For a guy that big to be that efficient, I absolutely love it. This offense should be much better. They're going from a guy in Matt Patricia, who should have been a defensive coordinator, to now Bill O'Brien, who's at least a league average play caller. So that's a huge bump up there. It should be a decent offense that features the running back. I think that Zeke will mix in on the goal line and some between the 20 stuff, but Ramondre Stevenson should have all of the receiving work, probably 60% of the goal line stuff, and then be the featured back between the 20s and challenge to be an RB1 this year. Then we have our 3-4 turn options. So these are guys that I'm fine taking in the late third. Like I would prefer to take in the early 4th, but a guy who's never going to get to the early 4th is DK Metcalf. Now, the case for DK Metcalf is really easy. He had a pretty brutal year efficiency-wise last year, where we now have JSN coming in, but he's hurt. He's going to start slow. Metcalf is presumably the wide receiver 1 in this offense. And last year, he had his most targets ever, his most receptions, his most volume, but the efficiency wasn't there at all, where he had his lowest yards per reception and his lowest touchdown total in his entire career. So if he can just pretty much match the same amount of targets and volume that he got last year, and the efficiency bounces back at all in this offense, like which I imagine it would, right, where JSN's taking a lot of the stuff underneath and out of the slot, then you're going to get a lot more breathing room for DK Metcalf. And if he can hit 10-plus touchdowns and get that yards per reception back up to like 13, 14, 15, then he could pretty easily finish as a wide receiver 1. Now, after that, we have Deebo Samuel, who we like. I'd prefer to take him in the early 4th if I could, but I'll take him in the late 3rd if I have to. He was the number 1 receiving option while McCaffrey, Deebo, Kittle, and Ayuk run the field together with Purdy. 25% target share. He now has back-to-back seasons of 25% target share. He also is a guy where if we look at his efficiency, expected points per game, he had 15 expected points per game each of the last 2 years. Expected points per game, again, based on your carries, your targets, your ADOT, how many points per game should you be putting up? And then his fantasy points over expected per game tanked from 6.1 when he was a monster in 2021 to -2. And we know Deebo Samuel is a good player. He has an efficiency ceiling. He doesn't need to get to 6.1 again, but even if he gets to like 2 FPOE per game and he gets to 17 points per game, he absolutely crushes his ADP. We want pieces of this offense. He has multiple paths to upside where he has rushing, receiving, and potentially being a handcuff to guys like McCaffrey and Kittle, where if they go down, he gets a boost. So Deebo Samuel, a guy who I'm very much fine taking in the 3rd round. After that, we have Keenan Allen. Some age concerns, but this is about as low as you can have him. He was the wide receiver 3 in points per game from weeks 11 on last year when he was finally healthy, and he was just an absolute monster. He could sleepwalk his way to a top 12 finish in this offense with Justin Herbert. It's really just an age thing is really all it comes down to, but he likely crushes again. Then we have another elite quarterback option in Lamar Jackson, who we talked about before, but I just want pieces of this Ravens offense. We talked about with Mark Andrews. Like this offense is going to be fun. It's going to be new. You have Greg Roman in there, and this is someone that had the highest points per game season ever in 2019, and is the QB4 over the last 3 seasons, not including the MVP campaign, with 21.5 points per game. And now he's going to be unlocked in this Greg Roman offense, or no, not Greg Roman offense, but going from Greg Roman to Todd Monken. It should be fireworks there. Now, our 311 is Breece Hall. Now, the last 2 running backs here, Breece Hall and Etienne, are guys that I'd really rather take in the early 4th. And most of the time, you're not going to have to take them in the 3rd because guys will take like Najee or Mixon or Aaron Jones over them, and it can push a guy like Breece Hall to the 4th round. And I understand that the floor is pretty low with Hall, right? He's coming off an ACL. If he's not the same guy, then he's not going to get enough volume to pay off. He's going to be very similar to what J.K. Dobbins last year was. But the ceiling is RB1 overall from week 6 on. This was a guy last year who, before tearing his ACL, was the RB8 with 17 points per game, despite not even playing over 50% of the snaps. He now is working back from the ACL. He's very much on track. He's probably going to start slow the first 2 or 3 weeks, and then, to me, I think you can start him by like week 3, 4 and feel good about it. And then from there, he can just absolutely crush, where he's going to be with Aaron Rodgers in this Nathaniel Hackett offense. He's going to be in that Aaron Jones, 60-40 split, receiving work, goal line work type of role. And in that role, he can really thrive. People seem to think that he needs all the volume in the world to thrive, and Dalvin Cook takes a lot away. Breece Hall last year, again, was the RB8 in points per game with under a 50% snap share. Now, that's, of course, not sustainable over an entire season, but last year he crushed, and he was far from a bell cow. He does not need the 80% opportunity share that a guy like Saquon has. He really just needs a 60-40 split and the valuable touches and some efficiency, and he pays off in a massive, massive way. Now, the last running back we're going to talk through is Etienne, our 312 here. Etienne's an electric rusher. He's a good player. He was 12th in breakaway run rate last year, 9th in missed tackles forced per attempt, 3rd in rushing yards over expected per attempt. He crushed it across the board, and really what it comes down to is if he can expand his receiving role. He had 17 catches in his first 2 years of college, and then he had 85 his last 2 years of college. What we're hoping for is he has a similar trend in the NFL, where his first 2 years he's a little bit down in receiving. Year 3 he comes out swinging with Trevor Lawrence, already having that established connection from college. So we'll see if that sort of takes place or takes form. And early on in the preseason, Dwayne McFarland pointed it out, but that has been the case so far, where he has been at like a 67-33 split with the other running backs, which is perfect. We don't need Travis Etienne to be a bell cow. 67-33 split, more than fine. What's really the important stuff is a 63% route participation. Eckler was at 57% last year. Anything over 60% is elite. So he's already on that pace in the preseason, 67% of long down and distance. If he can get the high leverage work of receiving and goal line, then Etienne's going to absolutely crush, and what's going to be a really good offense in this Jaguars team. So that is going to do it for today. That is your entire top 3 rounds from 101 to 312. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, if you want the complete rankings, I have that on Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. My top 200 for half PPR and full PPR, they're all tiered. They have my target rounds for each player. They have my targets and my avoids all highlighted. On top of that, in season, you get a bunch of stuff, dude. You're going to have me help you out with start sit decisions on Sundays, where we're going to do a Patreon-only live stream for start sit decisions. You have my weekly waiver wire article that comes out every Tuesday to tell you how much fab to bid on players. You have my weekly rankings that come out every week. You have my rest of season rankings that you can look at for trades. A bunch of stuff is on there. It's all really good stuff. But if you can't support there, it's genuinely all good. Just make sure you leave a like, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold, oh, oh.